Well, the first thing that I wanted to say is that this section, when it was presented to this House, was part of the dog's dinner that the Attorney General referred to, because it proposed in the original form that it came before this House that where somebody who was appointed to judicial office had not been recommended by the Commission, that the notice of appointment would also include, in iris efficacy, a reasoned explanation of the decision of the Government not to nominate a candidate recommended by the Commission. So the Government was to justify, in iris efficacy, was to write a little essay in iris efficacy saying why it had not followed not chosen from the shortlist put up by the Commission. Now, that would have been grotesque, it has to be said, because I mean, because first of all, you then have to look at the absolutely ridiculous subsection 3 that was appended to it in its original form, which says, in publishing the reasoned decision in accordance with subsection 2, the persons recommended by the Commission shall not be identified. So you had somebody who wasn't recommended being appointed. You had, the Government was to put a reasoned explanation as to why the people who were recommended were not appointed, and then it had to do that without identifying any of them. So, this does raise a question, though, which I really do want to tease out with the Minister. What degree of publicity is there going to be in respect of people who have been recommended? I mean, is it to be the case that people who are the shortlist is never to be made public? It's entirely a secret between the Commission and the Cabinet. If that is to be the case, how does that sit with what the Minister has repeatedly said in this House, that he would expect people who were shortlisted to be told they weren't shortlisted, and people who were shortlisted to tell them that they had been shortlisted? So are they supposed to, are they sworn to secrecy? Is that the idea? That they, I mean, if for instance, I, as a barrister, had applied to the Commission, and I'm not shortlisted, the Minister says that in accordance with best practice, I'd be told that. Can I tell my friends, sorry, I didn't make the shortlist? Likewise, if I am shortlisted, am I somehow sworn to secrecy? Is it to be the case that I can't tell people that I'm now in the shortlist which is going to go to Cabinet? So is it, what I really want to have is clarity as to whether the fact that you've been shortlisted is to be a complete secret on the one hand, or that you're entitled to know about it but are sworn to secrecy about it in some duty of confidentiality as another stage, or that you're perfectly free to go on television and announce, by the way, I was shortlisted 3 times for appointment to the High Court or whatever it is, and I'm astonished that I haven't been appointed after all these years. Which is it? I mean, are people to be in a position to tell the public, you know, I've been shortlisted so many times, it's sick, you know, I mean, I never get chosen, but I'm on the shortlist. Is somebody supposed to, are you supposed to keep your mouth shut about that for some reason? And
if it any sense, you would.
Well, you might or might not. You might think, you know, that you might think that you've been shortlisted, you know, 4 times now, and the Government had constantly turned you down.
Always a bridesmaid, never a bride.
Yeah, exactly. And you might at some stage say, you know, why is it that I've been on the shortlist on a number of occasions, and even though other people are added to the shortlist with me, I'm always discriminated against by this Government, or they have it in for me for some reason. Some kind of thought process of that kind. And I really do want to know whether the Minister is because he hasn't accepted amendments to this effect. Is the Minister advancing this bill on the basis that unsuccessful candidates for shortlisting will be told that that's what happened to them, that successful candidates for shortlisting will be told that that's what happened to them, or is it really implicit in this bill? And I think the original architecture and philosophy behind the bill is that none of this is disclosed to candidates. It's a secret process, and the government ministers are sort of not to mention the people that they haven't accepted, and it's to be kept secret from the public. And that's what I can't follow. Which is, in fact, the underlying philosophy in this bill. I can see very good reasons, if you have a system of this kind, for saying everybody must treat the shortlist in total confidence. And therefore, one of the things we will not do is tell people whether they were on it or off it, because that will undermine that confidence. I mean, if I say to a friend, a good friend, I was shortlisted, and he tells Senator Norris, who immediately tells the newspapers that I've been shortlisted.
I would never do such a thing.
in his normal discretion and absolute zipped mouth, he makes an exception on this occasion and tells a newspaper man that I was shortlisted. Is it a secret? Is a confidence being broken? And I'd like some clarity, because would it be open to a minister, for instance, to say that Senator Norris has been shortlisted 3 times, but we have no intention of appointing him? And would that be legitimate? There seems to be a kind of a mixed message coming from this legislation, and I'd like to have the Minister explain clearly if he is in favour of candidates being told whether they were not shortlisted or whether they were shortlisted. Is that confidential information? And are the media free if they find out that somebody is or is not shortlisted? Are they free to publish it?
Through the Chair, could I ask Senator McDowell, as the Minister has suggested, for his view on the question I raised about the legal standing of judges appointed under this recent decision and whether or not they could be challenged?
Chair.
No, I mean, I've made it clear on many occasions in this debate that the government is entitled to seek advice from whatever source it likes. It could consult with the Attorney General and the Minister for Justice alone, or it could ask them to ask senior judges for their opinions as to who should or should not be appointed to any particular office, or it could. The Attorney General could say to the President of the High Court or somebody, your court needs strengthening. Would you come up with some names of people that we should try to get to accept appointment to your court? Because they don't seem to be applying in sufficient numbers. I mean, there is nothing wrong with actually approaching somebody and saying, you should consider serving your country as a judge. And, you should consider that you've had a very good opportunity to earn a good living as a lawyer. Now you might consider doing some public service. But of course, somebody who is at the receiving end of such an approach, from my experience, would like to know, would consider that such an approach would not be made if they were then told, oh, by the way, thanks for volunteering, but we're not interested. I mean, that process is totally unreal. If you put out a feeler to somebody and say to them, please, you should consider being a judge, by whatever channel, be it the Attorney General, be it the Minister, be it a senior judge, if you give somebody the signal that the government would like to appoint them, or thinks they should apply for appointment, it seems to me to be completely ridiculous that they should then put in their application find that they were that this message was that they were misunderstanding the message completely, and there really was very little interest in appointing them in the first place. And certainly from my experience as Attorney General and as Minister for Justice, there were occasions when people were asked to make themselves available as judges, both through the jab and not through the jab. And there has to be some credibility in such an invitation, that it's not being made.
Were these people appointed?
Yes.
Fair enough.
There has to be some credibility if an approach of that kind is made to somebody, that they're not wasting their time, that their hopes are not being raised and then dashed. And that's why I have a real concern about this. But to go back to the point of this amendment, which is quite narrow in its focus, if somebody is to be shortlisted, either that's a secret between the Commission and the Cabinet, or it's not. And if it's not a secret, are the media free, if they find out about it, to publish it? By whatever means. By whatever means. If a minister inadvertently says, by the way, David Norris was shortlisted 3 times, but we haven't appointed him, is he to read that on the front of a newspaper?
Well, why not?
Well, I mean,
a journalist would certainly publish it.
Well, a journalist would certainly publish it. That's the whole point. So, is this confidential information or not? And that's the real thing on which I would like to the minister to be clearer, because he blithely says, "Oh, of course, best practice is that you say who was shortlisted and who wasn't." And I know, for instance, from my experience as a minister, that where people were shortlisted for non-judicial jobs, they were told the outcome. You are on the shortlist, first of all, and then if the minister is making the appointment personally, usually he has the courtesy to tell each of the candidates who know they're on the shortlist, "I'm sorry, you're not getting the job. X is getting the job instead of you." That's what happens. But I mean, in this case, I'm completely mystified as to whether we are really drawing a veil of secrecy over the shortlist, or we're not. And I would like the minister to clearly state where he stands on that issue.
Senator Croft.